What's up, Dad Hackers? My name is Patrick Antonucci, and I am the host and founder of this podcast and community of Dad Hackers. Whether you're new here or have been here for a long time, I want to personally welcome you. Dad Hackers is a community of Christian fathers who are devoted to encouraging, equipping, and enabling one another to become the men that God has created and designed us to be, so that we can raise up the next generation of fully devoted followers of Christ and leave a legacy of multi-generational faithfulness. On this show, we primarily interview Christian men to dive into their experiences and insights into what it means to be a Christian man, a Christian husband, a Christian father, and a leader. We ask questions that dig deep into the thinking and rationale of these men so that we can all learn and grow into the men that God is calling us to be. I'm grateful you've joined us today. Make sure you subscribe so that you never miss any of our episodes. Also, be sure to leave an honest review. Reviews help to boost the show's ratings, which means that more dads are going to come across our show and benefit from the content that we put out. I wanted to let you know that we also have a free private Facebook group just for Christian men. So head on over to facebook.com/group/dadhacker and apply to join by answering the 3 questions when prompted. So that's facebook.com/group/dadhacker. My guest today is Jon Fuller. Jon is the founder and host of Are You Real? Finding the Authentic You. This is a podcast where he has real, raw, and authentic conversations with Christians that are changing their families, communities, cities, and nations. He is a devoted husband, father, and entrepreneur that has chosen to make a difference in the lives of those around him. It took him 16 years to understand and receive God's healing, restoration, and to find his real self. And he is still in the process of walking that out daily. Just like most people, he has had many setbacks and struggles. Statistically, he shouldn't even be where he is today, but he believes in living a life that is on purpose. He is the voice of manifestation. What does that mean? Jon is calling out the gifts and talents in other people so that they will manifest and they will be equipped to walk in their destiny and calling. Here's my interview with Jon Fuller. All right, Jon, what's up, brother?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us today. I appreciate it, man.
Absolutely, dude. Excited to be here and excited to hang out with you.
Yeah. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since we first connected. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you got going on and those types of things.
Yeah, so I am first and foremost a husband and a father to 3 amazing kids. This was going to be my 20-year anniversary, so pretty excited about that. And besides that, I am an entrepreneur, own multiple businesses. I have a tendency to overextend myself sometimes and like to do lots of different things. Own a construction company, would buy and flip houses, do a lot of remodels, new homes, have a fitness business, and about to venture into a coffee shop with my kids and my wife. So we got a lot going on and we keep it pretty busy around here, not always on purpose. And if it wasn't for my wife, I would probably have this place in a mess. So she keeps us foundational and she keeps things real, I should say, or at least organized.
That's good, man. That's good. You also have a podcast, Are You Real? And that's actually how I got in touch with you. I was listening to your podcast. I was like, hey, we'll bring him on the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you have going on there?
Yeah, so the podcast started almost a year and a half. It might even be 2 years. I can't even remember. I'm on episode like 108 or something like that. So during the course of Are You Real is about finding purpose for your life. I believe that with a passion that every person has been given a God-given abilities and talents. And it is our job to discover what those are, and like a hidden treasure, and to serve the world around us with those things. That being said, usually our pain points in our life are an expression of kind of a lot of times what we're called to do. So Are You Real was a a way for me to get rid of the pain of there wasn't a platform and there wasn't a way. I went to a mega church at the time. It was a great church, a lot of good people. But the problem is there's only one stage for obviously the pastor or pastors. And I get that and I respect that. But the problem I had is there was a lot of people around me that had a lot of talent, whether that was people like you that wanted to encourage dads, people with family or marriages or business, different things. So what was happening is I saw all this talent around me that people had to give to those around them, but it wasn't being utilized. And my frustration is how do we where is there a platform that could help people get their name and their ministry and their stuff out there? And there wasn't one that I saw. So, and including myself, like I had something to give and I was like, how do I give it? There isn't room for me. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you know what, then I'm going to create the very thing that there's a lack of. And that's why I started the podcast and started, promoting people and ultimately promoting what God was doing in people's lives. Like, people like you're excited to share and encourage dads to be a better dad. Well, there's a lot of men who need that. There's a lot of people like on my show that need to find purpose and direction and what has God called them to. So I wanted to get that message out there and just promote what God was doing. And that's why we started the podcast. And it's just been it's been a lot of fun. I've got to meet an enormous amount of people. Mm-hmm. And, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation today if it wasn't for that.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a big question that a lot of people are asking is, what is my purpose? Can you dive into that a little bit more about how exactly can I find my purpose if I'm on that journey,
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is discovering yourself. And I think and I highly recommend if you've never taken a DISC test, that's DISC, I highly recommend you need to take a DISC test, a Myers-Briggs test. We do that inside of our beta group and inside of our courses. And then the other one I just got into that I don't know a lot about that I've been kind of dabbling in. I just interviewed a guy on a best-selling book called The Enneagram type deal. And they're all different. And they give you different snapshots of who you are, your personality. And the reason that's important is because all of us have quirks, right? We have these isms that God is working out of us to be more Christ-like. And the reason it's important we discover who we are and how we deal with ourselves, for instance, is you might have a quirk that's just natural. That's just who you are. But if you don't know that, you might beat yourself up over it and think, oh man, I just suck, or, I'm different than everybody else. And what that does is that leaves room for the enemy to come into our mind and sit there and beat us up on things that he knows is just, that's how we were created, but we think something's wrong with us. Mm-hmm. And the reason I like that is as you discover who you are and what you like and the goods and the bads and all this stuff, it allows you to step into your purpose. It's like kind of a puzzle, and you're putting all these puzzle pieces together, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. This is maybe what I like or what I don't like, or this is what I'm good at or not good at. Right now I'm learning I'm not a structured system person. I'm about to hire a personal coach myself. And I flat out told him, and he specializes in systems. And he asked me, he's like, so how do you see yourself? I said, well, here's the deal, man. I suck at systems. I've spent my entire life rebelling against them and seeing how I can break them personally. And but I've come to realize, being an entrepreneur for 20 years, that if I want to succeed past where I'm at, I'm going to have to implement really good systems. So I told him, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation if I didn't recognize the need for it. I'm just going to have to accept the fact that even though I hate them, I really need them. So that being said, that's so to answer your question, a really long answer is take some tests.
This is good. This is good.
Yeah. Discover who you are, get to know you. And then as you start to discover that, what do I like? What do I not like? What's my personality like? Oh, another one, I got to find a book. And I'm looking around as we're talking right now. Strength Finder. That's it. That's another book that I highly recommend. And as I use Strength Finders to help people, and that kind of helps you of what you're naturally good at. And give saying so. We talk about all these things in our course and all our stuff as far as to find purpose, but those are books and tools that we use to kind of to help people find purpose, and the tools that I've used to help find my purpose.
So something that comes to mind as you're talking about that. Suppose I take some of these tests. I think I'm starting to figure out who I am and what I'm doing, and I venture out and I try something new, and it fails.
Yeah.
What do I do then?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I've struggled with that with my whole life, and here's the problem with that. So in society, in school has a big part of that, and you're a school teacher, so I'm totally not bashing this, so take this with a grain of salt. So
no, we homeschool our kids.
Okay,
I got it from all angles.
Okay, so here's the problem with what I see sometimes in the system is it's a pass or fail, right? So we get an A, B, C, D, or F, right? And and the problem with that is let's just say I don't do a good job. That doesn't necessarily mean I suck or that I'm not good at it. Maybe that's not my strength, but it needs to be processed, or I need to become a little better at it. But the problem is so many kids get discouraged. Like, it would be equivalent to like, here's an example. I hate running. I just do. My wife is a phenomenal runner. I am an athlete. I played college football. I love sports, but I hate running. It's like my version of hell. It is just not fun. But I committed to doing a 5K. This was several years ago. I did my wife's training with all of her classes. I went through it. That first day I went out there, I could barely run a mile in probably 8 minutes. I mean, it was probably a 10-minute mile. I don't know what it was, but it was terrible. But that being said, by the time I was done, I could finish a 5K. Now, was I breaking any records? Absolutely not. I mean, there was people that looked like they were 150 pounds overweight that passed me while I was running.
Ouch.
Which was hilarious.
Right.
And being a competitive person, that was really funny for me, mind-wise. But the thing about that, the reason I bring that up is just because you fail at something, you have to have a stepping point. You have to have a start. If you like it and you fail, well, great. Get back up and try it again. Nobody was good. I mean, why is it as adults we beat ourselves up when we try something? But if you know this, you said you had what, 4 kids, 5 kids?
5, yeah.
Okay, so when your kids first started walking, did you yell at them and be like, and they fell down, they took 2 steps and fell down, right? And you were probably holding them. They took a couple steps, you let them go, and then they maybe took 1 or 2 steps and they fell. Mm-hmm. Well, did you sit there and look at your kids and be like, oh, you stupid, get back up, can't you walk?
Right.
Like, that'd be child abuse, right?
Yeah.
So then why do we as adults beat ourselves up? Like, we fail at something, but those are the words, those are the things that we tell ourselves. Oh, you're stupid, you suck, you'll never be good. Maybe you don't, I do. I mean, I've had to get better at being kind to myself. I think we're so hard on ourselves. But I just don't understand that. But as a society, we beat ourselves up when we first do something. Mm-hmm. But we don't do that to our kids. We don't yell at them or when they're first starting to talk. It's not like I'd look at my 1-year-old and be like, get your words out. What, you can't talk right? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And I think we need to be more kind to ourselves and say, hey, it's okay to fail, expect to fail, but every time you do, learn something. I mean, I've been in business for 20 years. My biggest lessons in business have been my biggest failures and extremely hard pain points where I look back and said, well, that was a really bad idea. I'm not going to do that again. So I think it comes down to is don't be scared to fail. Expect it. Just make a note when you do, like, hey, what did I learn from this? How could I do it better? I mean, my gosh, we've all heard this one. Einstein, they say, did the light bulb, was it 10,000 or 1,000? I mean,
right.
he did it more times than I ever would have, I can tell you that, but he was passionate about finding light.
Right.
And I think that's important to notice, that it's okay to fail, just whatever it is that you fail, and learn from it and just do it better next time.
Excellent thoughts. I think a lot of times people that tend to beat themselves up a lot came from a background where they were maybe their dad was sarcastic with them, or maybe their mom, not to start psychoanalyzing people, but this is what I've seen. Maybe their mom was super critical. And so they have their voice in the back of their head constantly discouraging them. You know what I mean? And I think that that's something we can also consider with our own children, is that we can be more kind to them. We can always be more encouraging with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's say, I'm trying something new and it gets hard, it gets difficult. I have failures, but I'm looking at those as opportunities for growth and things I know not to do, or things I'm using that as constructive feedback, so to speak. When it gets really tough, how do you know when to quit, throw in the towel, and this is just definitely something I should not be pursuing?
Yeah.
Versus how do I know when to keep going, when to keep pressing into it? Because like you said, lots of times when people, the pain points that we have are indicators of areas of our gifting, or areas that we need to pursue more. How do I filter that? I mean,
that's a really good question. So I have a saying out of sarcasm. I say, embrace the suck. Sometimes you just got to push through. And a lot of times, we had the conversation before we started the show of, for my podcast, I stuck to 1 year knowing that I'd want to quit at 6 months. That's going back to obviously personality tests, different things, knowing ourselves. So I had to push through at 6 months, even when things didn't look like very promising. But the most important part that I believe is really have a relationship with the Lord. I'm assuming most of your listeners, if they're Christians or not, but that's really spending time, for me, and I'm just going for me, is I spend time with God. I try to every day through talk. I don't have time in the mornings always to spend a half hour, an hour, but really just asking the Father, say, what do you have for me? What do I do today? What do I do about this or that? Because I think it's really important, because sometimes there's times in our lives. I'll give you an example. Our church just went through not having a pastor for a year. Okay.
Wow.
Everything in my mind would say, from a logistical standpoint, from common sense, from where we were at, just like, we need to leave. This is foolish. But my wife was on the worship team. A good friend of ours was the pastoral leader, was the worship leader. But every time we prayed about, hey, should we leave? We never felt peace about it. And we never left, because we felt like God was saying, you need to stay here and help through this transition. So, and now we're about to see some amazing fruit, and it really is going to be amazing. But had we left, we wouldn't get to see the promise of things fulfilled. So I think it is really important to step into, God, what do you have for me? What do you have for my spouse or my kids or my family? What do you have for us? Where do we need to be, and what do we need to do? Because when things get really hard, it's easy to quit, because nobody enjoys pain, but it's through the pain that we find purpose. It's through pain that we find who we are. It's through pain that we find character flaws and things that we shouldn't have done. Yeah. And I think it's really good. I used to think it was good for my kids. You want to protect your kids from pain, right? Ultimately, right. I think that is the biggest mistake we could ever make, because, and don't get me wrong, there's certain pain things I don't want my kids to ever experience that I had to, but right. There's a lot of pain sometimes that we try to keep people from when they really need it, because it's through pain that it exposes who we are. And but ultimately, to answer your question again, is really, you need to seek the Lord and to say, God, what do you have for me in this season? What do I stick with this, or do I bail? Are you trying to teach me? And here's the hardest part. You could go through something and see no fruit for maybe a year and be like, why did you keep me here? Why did I stay with this? That doesn't make sense. And people are even maybe criticizing you, saying you need to get out of this, when in fact God wanted you to learn something to build foundational character in your life. So don't ever overlook those things. Just because you can't see the fruit or you can't see something right now, that does not mean that God's not building something in you that's foundational for future things.
So good, man. So good. You mentioned a while ago when you were going through your list of entrepreneurial endeavors that you tend to overextend yourself. Now, kind of staying on this topic of figuring out who we are and everything, how do you stay focused on the priorities, the important things, when there's so many options out there? I mean, yeah. Even if you just look at all the things that you can do with podcasting and all the online options that you have for your Are You Real platform, I'm sure you've got all the social media, you have email, you have websites, you have courses, ebook. I mean, you have all these different options, and that's just for that. But in general, how do we stay focused?
I think first and foremost, obviously the majority of your audience is men. I think first and foremost, you have to recognize we need to put the Lord first. And that's hard. I think for most guys, like we did a conference a while back, you'll typically find even my audience is, from what we found, is like 60% women, 40% men. When we were at this last conference that my friend put on that I spoke out, it was majority women. It was about a 70-30 mix. And I think that's really sad. And I'll tell you why, because men are the head of the household biblically. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about, if you're coming from a male chauvinistic dominating personality, then I'm just going to be honest with you. You really need to check yourself, because you got issues. Is the Bible says that Christ laid his life down to serve the church. Okay. That's an example of us. So as men, first and foremost, if we're married, we need to, and it's hard, it's a sacrifice every day, but we need to serve our families. We need to serve our wife. We need to serve our kids. We need to love them, whatever that looks like. And going back to that, sometimes that means, meeting needs. So if my family needs a roof over their head and they need food and basic necessities, well, that means I need to get off my butt. I need to go to work every day. If that means I need to work 10 hours because I did. At one point, I worked 2 jobs for years when we were young and had 3 kids. I did whatever I had to do to serve my family at that time. Now there was an expense to that. And what I mean by that is, financially, I was trying and meeting a need. But then the flip side to that is I was giving up the time with my wife that she needed. Mm-hmm. So the learning process of that is, okay, how do I back off from working too much because I enjoyed it, to spending more time with my wife and kids, right? So what I try to do is sometimes you got to be honest. I mean, there's been times where I've driven down the road and I've just flat out asked my kids. I've had this conversation with my wife, is to say, hey, how am I doing as a dad or a husband? Am I meeting your needs? Be honest. And here's the thing. You can't get upset when you work too much, or you're not very open about things, or when we bring up conversation, you don't like to talk about it. And those are things I've heard. And do they hurt? Absolutely. But here's the thing. It's the truth. And if they're saying it, I can't sit there and combat it. I ask the question. And if you really want to grow as a husband, as a person, as a father, mother, doesn't matter, you're going to have to ask hard questions, and then you're going to have to adjust your life accordingly to what people say. Now, I'm not talking about their viewpoint of you. If somebody says that, they just don't like you, I'm talking about people that really have influence in your life, like close friends, husband, wife, kids, stuff like that. So to answer that, how I organize things is when I start getting overextended and I'm not meeting priority, which is to provide for my family, uh, uh, the Lord, putting the Lord first, my family, and then obviously other things after that. If those things aren't first and I'm neglecting those, then something else has to be cut off. Because here's the thing, I've personally met and read a lot of stories about a lot of very successful people that are miserable, because we view success, the world views success typically off of how big, how many houses do I have, how much money I made, I grew a huge business. Well, that's great.
It's all material.
It's material, and I love it. I mean, I'm a businessman. I like growing big things. I dig it. But here's the problem. There was an expense. Something else it cost from something else to get to there.
Right.
And if that means that I had, how many times you hear, well, they've been married 2 or 3 times, or their kids were suicidal, or something terrible. If that's what I have, if that's the price that I have to pay to have a successful business, then forget it. I'm not giving up my wife and my kids at the sake of having a big ministry or business, because that's the flip side. So, how many times I hear of pastors that get divorced or their kids are neglected, and they're like, well, I had an amazing dad and he served in ministry and all these people loved him, but I never saw him.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way my kids, that's just not going to happen. I do not, when it comes to the day that my kids are giving, I'm 100 years old and they're giving us talk at my funeral, I don't want those words to ever come out of my family's mouth.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's probably why we have that terminology, the preacher's kid or a PK.
Yes.
And it's usually not a positive piece of terminology when people say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why you mentioned the lack of men at this conference and just your experience. And that's something I always like to dive into, is kind of like the state of manhood, particularly in Western culture, and more specifically within the church. Why this lack of men? Why this lack of manhood? This lack of biblical men leading families biblically? What are your thoughts on that?
Man, I think there's a lot. Why is there because I think part of it is, the older generation's culture, men didn't really relate to their feelings of how they felt about stuff. It was kind of, and you still see that obviously, like not to talk about certain things or struggles because it's not quote unquote manly or whatever, which I think is just completely stupid, and it drives me nuts because I think that's it's basically what it is. You got a bunch of guys that are hiding skeletons in their closets we're all dealing with the same issues. We all have to deal with not feeling adequate enough as a husband, or we have to deal with lust, or just whatever it is that we as guys deal with. And so what happens is we try to tuck that away in a closet and act like as if it doesn't exist, when in fact we need to be talking about it, because as we talk about it, it brings things to the light, and it helps other men encourage each other to be better husbands, better fathers, and to say, hey, it's okay to struggle. But what happens is for so many years, I think in the church, is we didn't talk about those things. So they're just like, this is stupid. Why do I want to come to church to feel like I'm just getting beat up on? Right? I mean, I can go to work and get beat up on. I can go home if I have a bad marriage, I can get beat up on. I mean, there's plenty of places for me to my character, all those things to get beat up on. Church really needs to be a place to where we're growing in character, we're encouraging one another to be better people. And I think as people like you are talking about, being better men, and people like my podcast, Finding Purpose, as we start to discover who we are and becoming better people, and having Christ characteristics, and being open and honest about conversations in church, I think what that does is it opens a platform for men to come in and really recognize their place as, hey, man, put your big boy pants on, put your boots on, step up to the plate and be the guy and the man that God called you to be. And people want to say, and I hate this when people say, oh, well, I grew up rough and I had a bad home life. And I mean, I'm not kidding you. and we won't get into all this stuff, but I don't know anybody, when you were to put my wife and I side by side, I don't know anybody who's been through more crap in their life than my wife and I. I'm talking sexual abuse. I'm talking being left at a young age, deaths in the family, just things. It is not an excuse. So if you're I'm talking to men or women, if your excuse is, well, this in my past, is it legitimate? Absolutely. Does it hurt? Absolutely. But if that is your puddle that you're stuck in, and I'm talking about a puddle, I'm not talking about a deep hole. I'm talking about a puddle that you're complaining about, that you're playing in, moaning and groaning. It's time to grow up, deal with the issue, learn from it, get healing, and be the best person you can be. Because there's a saying that I've said, and I know I picked it up from somewhere, but it says, hurt people hurt people.
Yep.
And if we continue to go around people say, well, I didn't have a dad, I don't know how to be a dad. Well, great. Find somebody who's a good dad and start asking questions. Mm-hmm. and figure out how to be a good dad. Don't let your past hinder you from the bright and amazing future that God has for you.
Good stuff, man. So you talk about kind of being real and being vulnerable, I guess, or getting to know ourselves better within the context of church. So what comes to mind is I go to church Sunday morning. I bring my kids, got to drop them off in the nursery or the student ministry or whatever. I might have a duty to do. I might be a greeter, an usher, something like that. And then there's the sermon. Maybe we do some worship. Then we do the sermon, and then there's the closing, maybe an invitation or something like that. And then some small talk in the lobby, maybe. But most of my time was staring at the back of people's heads during worship and during the sermon. And then I go home. How do we get that community when that's 1 hour, maybe hour and a half on Sunday, and I'm not even really fully engaged with people? I'm watching what's going on up on the stage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's twofold. So like for me, even going through this last year at church, I hated it. And I just didn't like it. And even my kids were complaining about it. And I get it. But here's the thing. You still got to find something positive about it. So positive about it. Here's the thing. I'm just, on average, we're going to spend about an hour at church. Let's just say, okay?
Right.
I have a choice to make that hour count in my life. So I'm going to church. I'm going to find God one way. This is my mindset. Right. I'm going to find God one way or another. Whether I like the music or not, I'm going to worship God with all of my heart, because that's the way I connect. And then in the message, whether I like the pastor, maybe I don't like him personally. I mean, let's just be honest. There's people we don't like the way they look. We don't like the way they sound. We can find a flaw. He said something, she said something we didn't like, right? Well, great. Right. But there's something I can take out of that message that changes me. And my focus needs to be, I'm going to go worship the Lord. I'm going to spend my time with him, get something out of it. And I'm going to find something positive about that message that I can implement into my life. And then during and after church, I mean, honestly, there's sometimes I show up to church and I'm like, dude, I just don't feel like seeing nobody. Like, I don't want to talk. I don't even want to be here. But here's the thing. Just because that's the way I feel doesn't make it right. You know, I'm sure Jesus, when he was tired, there was times he didn't feel like dealing with his whiny disciples. And I mean, just even think about the garden when they fell asleep. I mean, he literally said, can you guys not stay awake for an hour and pray with me? Like, I'm about to go to the cross. Can you not do this? And I think sometimes we just have to push through. I mean, is it somewhat fake to put on a smile and act like, yeah, I mean, I hate to say that because I'm all about being authentic, but sometimes you just got to push through your feelings and be nice and warm up, because that person next to you just might need a smile from you because they've had a really bad week or bad day. So before and after church, man, try to meet and greet, love people. The Bible says, love God, love yourself, and love people, man. I can't love people if I don't love myself, right?
Exactly.
So love those around you. And if you're going to spend an hour of your day and you're going to go to church, commit to getting something out of it. Now, if you're not going to get anything out of it, then don't go. I mean, let's just be honest, dude. I mean, I could go to I make the joke, I've never been to the Elks Club, but I mean, I could find another club of people I can go hang out with. But here's the thing, I choose to go to church on Sunday because I want to worship God. I want to connect there. I want to be everything that God's created me to be, and I want to make an impact in people's lives. And sometimes that means smiling or being friendly when I don't feel like it.
Yeah, and you said something about the person might have needed to see your smile, and maybe that's how God's going to use you that day. And
Yep.
if you didn't show up, you missed your opportunity to carry out the good works of the Lord. And there's something to be said about being faithful to worshiping the Lord on Sunday and sticking to your commitments. And I think that's where the conviction and your commitment as a man leading your family spiritually is being consistent in attending.
Yeah.
Even if you don't feel like it.
And this is really hard. So for years, the first probably 10, 15 years of my wife and I's marriage, she was on staff, worship leader. We served. Sometimes we were at church 4 times a week. I mean, I kid you not, we spent a lot of hours there. Now, as we've gotten older and our kids have gotten older, there's times I literally make church 1 time in a month. Now, I have some
Wow.
Pentecostal friends that would probably think that I was going to hell and my faith is backslidden, and I get a kick out of it, honestly, because I'm like, dude, if you are that caught up in religion, you have a problem, not me. And but here's the thing. I spend hours with the Lord every week. I don't have to go to church to spend time with the Lord, to get filled up, to have what he has for me. I go to church to serve people, to love them, to help people through whatever. So, and what I'm saying is, this is even going back to your previous question about prioritizing. There's times where our family is moving so fast and we have so much going on that we will choose not to go to church on Sunday just to sleep in and to get rest and to eat a late breakfast and to relax, and then maybe watch a sermon on TV that we like, or spend time together. Because, sometimes as men, you have to, or women, my wife does too, she'll just be like, I don't feel like we're supposed to go today, man. Our family needs to rest. And sometimes rest is more important than just going and doing.
Yeah, and you kind of worship and have church, so to speak, the service anyway, at home with your family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, leading your family. Good stuff. So earlier, kind of going on a whole different direction here. Earlier, you mentioned this course that you're beta testing, and for people to help them figure out who they are. Can you tell us a little bit about how'd that come about and what you have going on with that?
Yeah, so I partnered up with a friend of mine who was in the Navy. He just is finishing up his service time. He specializes in personality profiling testing. He's excellent at it. And him and I just joined up. We started a course. It turned into, it really was a 12-week course that we condensed into 8 weeks. We did it for 1 hour a week. Gave a homework assignment, and we just talked about we went through all the different tests. We talked about pain points, personalities, all kinds of just different things, and walked people through the process of discovering themselves and discovering who they are and what they do and don't like. One thing that really stood out to me, I just asked this lady, I was curious. I said, what's been your biggest takeaway so far? We were about 4, maybe 5 weeks into it. And she said, discovering who I am has made me a better wife. For her, it wasn't even about finding purpose. All of a sudden, she kind of discovered who she was, and her and her husband's relationship got better, and their marriage got better. So I thought, man, that was really cool, because that wasn't in the back of my head. I'm thinking, most people want to know why I'm here on earth. What am I called to do? What are my gifts and talents? She was in the process of discovering her, and it made their marriage better. And I thought, dude, there's nothing better, honestly, than that. Because
right.
You can find your purpose, but if it's at the sacrifice of your marriage, then there's really no purpose. So those are the things that excite me, because when people become better versions of themselves, and it's adding value to their spouse or to their kids, that's exciting because I really
Yeah.
believe, you know, society, I think, has just gone to hell in a handbasket for the most part. I mean, we see the school shootings, we see all these things that are going on. And here's the thing, we can have an impact, we can change some of that from the outside, but it really starts in the home. It really starts as fathers. It really starts as um, pouring into our families. And I can't, and other people can't do that if they're not healthy. And I'm talking spiritually, physically, emotionally, all the way around. So that's what we do. So that's what we're trying to provide through our course and through our podcast is to help people just become healthy in all areas of life.
Yeah, I was listening to your podcast, and you have these different cultural mountains, so to speak, that you kind of cover with your different hosts on there. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, and I'm going to hack it. You're going to have to go on my website. It's been a while since I looked at it, but the
Yeah.
concept that I did not come up with, it's been around for about 30 years. What it's talking about is 7 cultural mountains: business, religion, government, family. There's several others, and I always forget them. But that being said, is every person is called to that mountain or mountains. Okay, so for instance, media is one.
Mm-hmm.
So like right now in my life, I feel like I'm called kind of almost 3 mountains. So it'd be religion. They overlap. So religion,
right.
mountain. The other one would be media, which would be my podcast. And then the third one is business. And those overlap. And ultimately in society, whoever's at the top of those mountains controls society. Okay. So think about this. Think about, and we're not going to get into politics. I don't want anybody's friggin' hair to, stand up and get all freaked out or anything, but just take the shift. So let's talk. So top of our mountain for government would be presidents. Okay. So let's think about just the spiritual transition and think about the business transition that has happened in the last 4 years, going from Barack Obama to Donald Trump. Okay. So you can just see, I'm just trying to give examples here. Mm-hmm. Just think about the cultural shift, even in business, how that shifted in the last couple years. Okay. So that just shows you that whoever's at the top can shift culture. Okay.
Right.
So the reason I think it's so important as Christians that we take our gifts and our talents and we get to those top of the mountains. If we had more Christians, and I'm not talking about sitting at like in NBC or Fox News or whatever, but I'm saying and preaching the gospel. I honestly, I'm just going to be blunt here. I think it's foolish. Okay. But you could still be in those positions leading with godly character, godly views, and still shift the culture in the way towards the Lord without having to preach the gospel from the top. And it's really important as Christians that we recognize that. So for instance, you're a school teacher, okay? Mm-hmm. Whoever your boss is, the superintendent or the school or the principal, okay? If he is a different religion, if he has different preferences or viewpoints, he controls the atmosphere and he shifts the direction. It can still be a government agency, but his viewpoints on his worldview in politics, in Christianity, whatever it is, good or bad, he controls that environment. Mm-hmm. Whether we like it or not, it's still, that is his sphere of influence, his mountain, okay? It should be our goal to get to the top there. And I'm not talking about being oppressive and all those stupid things that people might think of or hear, but I'm talking about being at the top to provide godly character, to love people, to nurture people, to be everything that Christ is to us. Our goal should be to put people or get to the top to be that example to the rest of the people around us.
Yeah, what I hear you saying a lot about is the whole concept of influence. I mean, people in these types of positions, the tops of the mountains, wherever you are, you hold a lot of sway and you hold a lot of influence. And as men, particularly as husbands and fathers, in the family mountain, we all by default, so to kind of have are on the top of the mountain in our family. And
Yes.
we can shift the trajectory of our family based on how we are. And if we choose to do nothing, to be a deadbeat dad and to not provide for our family, not protect our family, not educate them, not teach them about the Lord, we're influencing them, and we're putting them on a path toward negativity. Or we could be used by God to shift and go in the right direction.
Yeah.
Good stuff, man. So if people want to get in touch with you or reach out to you or get involved or more with the whole Are You Real platform, what's the best way they could do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Get on Facebook. Go to Are You Real? And it's ARE, Are You Real? We are on Twitter. Obviously, it's Are You Real Pod, POD. And then one of the best ways is go to our website, areyoureal.org, O-R-G. Don't go to .com. It's going to send you to a building site, which is cool. But anyways, go to areyoureal.org. And I'll be honest with you, and I do a lot of these shows, people will always try to personally friend me on Facebook. If I don't know you, I won't friend you. And that's just personal preference, man. If you want to connect, if you will join I interact with people all the time, but I do it through our business because my wife is able to help facilitate some of that stuff. So if you go to our Facebook page, that's always the best way to contact us, be a part of what we're doing. And I love people's stories. So if you hear this and you want to shoot me an email through our website, just how you heard us and what God's doing in your life, I read every story, and I reply to about 99% of the emails.
Good stuff. And we'll put everything in the show notes so that everybody can easily find all that information. So as we wrap up here, I always like to ask my guests, what makes a great dad?
Man, what makes a great dad? I didn't talk about it. I really think, and this is cheesy, and I'm sorry, but man, a great dad.
We like cheese.
Okay, we like cheese. Is a man who is intentional with the Lord, who loves Jesus, and is able to receive what God has for him. Because here's the thing: you cannot give what you don't have. And that sounds really simple, but here's the thing. If I can't receive the love that God has for me and his goodness and his kindness and the things that he wants me to be, then how can I expect to give that to my wife and kids and people around me if I can't go to the source? Because if the word says that he is the living word, he is the water that I'll never thirst again. Okay, metaphorically, if he is those things, the bread of life, if I go to him and am able to receive, the more I give, the overflow of that is going to go to my wife and kids. So if I can't spend time with him to receive, then I will not have the capacity to put out what other people most importantly need around me.
Good stuff, Jon. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, brother. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. You're welcome.
So there's our interview with Jon Fuller. I hope you enjoyed the show. To get access to all of the resources mentioned in the show or to find out more about Jon, check out the show notes at dadhackers.us/003. To join our free private Facebook group just for Christian dads, go to facebook.com/groups/dadhacker. Now, if you're ready for a challenge, then join our free 5-day email challenge to be a better dad. Each day, you'll get an email delivered right to your inbox with training and an action step that will help you develop a framework and habits for being a better dad. Now, if you do these consistently over time, they will produce amazing results and improve your relationships and improve your influence with your children. To get started with that, go to dadhackers.us/challenge. As always, an honest review and rating in iTunes would be much appreciated. So if you haven't left one for us yet, please do that today. Until next time, remember Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another.